Quick advisory before we begin. There are spoilers ahead for the series we're discussing, as well as the books that it's based on. Personally, I don't think it's going to impact your enjoyment of any of those things, but some people are particular about this. So, just be aware. Hey everyone, welcome to Zonan Canada. I'm your host Jesse Betteridge. So today we are doing another retrospective on an anime that has specific cultural importance to Canada, even though most people who live in this country probably don't even know that it exists. We're talking about the 2007 anime adaptation of the Emily of New Moon novels, called Kaze no Shoujo Emily, or Emily Girl of the Wind. So chances are, you probably didn't know that there was an Emily of New Moon anime. You probably also didn't know that this Emily of New Moon anime was a total failure in every single market it aired in the entire world, except for Arabic-speaking countries, where it is phenomenally popular. We'll be getting into all of that today, and my guests I'd like to welcome back to the show after quite a while is the great Mike Toole. Mike, thanks for coming on again. What have you been up to?
Oh, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate that. I'm still sort of a semi-pro for a long time for Discotheque Media. Haven't been doing any projects for them lately, but you will see me steering our big industry panel at Otakon in a couple of months. My most recent projects are actually for Tsuburaya, the Ultraman people. I do some incidental voices in a couple of their dubs. One of them is for the OVA Ultraman USA, and the other one is the Ultraman film series Ultraman 4K Discovery, which is actually a 4K remaster of select Ultraman 1966 episodes. So I got brought in to do some dubbing for that, and that was a very unique experience because not only is dubbing incredibly difficult, it's even harder if you're dubbing to live action because you have to sound natural and not cartoony and over the top. But that's the stuff that I've been into over the last year that you can hopefully go out and find in the stores.
Yeah, I have a tough time watching live action stuff dubbed a lot of the time, but it's encouraging to hear that kind of effort being put into it. And I've also I've tried and failed to get into classic Ultraman a few times, but I'd love to give it another shot.
Well, this 4K collection looks eye-popping. It really just looks like it was filmed yesterday, but it's decades old. Tsuburaya are really cool to work with too. Their stance is basically, well, we're going to dub as much as we can in English because we want like 4 and 5-year-olds to be able to, we want you to be able to start them young because Ultraman originally, that was a kid's thing that just grew to encompass generations of fans.
That's great. That's there's so many things out there that'd be like, oh, this would be great to show to kids, but it's only subtitles. You can't really do that.
Right.
I got a full 4K setup, and I think there's no better way to utilize that than guys in suits fighting. So I'm looking forward to that. We have another guest on the episode today. We're very lucky to have her, Sherly Kyorkis. Sherly, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, folks. Yeah, of course. Hi, Jesse. Hi, Mike. Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Sherly. I use any pronouns. I've been attending Anime North now, I think since 2011 was my first Anime North, but I always saw it on YTV and was like, I must go to this place. But since 2016, I started paneling, and I've been paneling ever since with one of my best friends. His name is Braden. We often do Digimon panels. There's not a lot of Digimon content or spaces at Anime North, at least, that give Digimon fans an opportunity to talk about the franchise. So we do a lot of that. And then I'm very interested in anime and how it exists culturally and kind of historically in the Arabic-speaking region. And, my parents grew up watching anime. It was kind of the first cartoons they ever saw, minus the Flint, like Hanna-Barbera / Disney. And one of the first cartoons I ever actually watched was The Adventures of Sinbad, which was a big popular anime in Iraq, which is where I was born. and lots of cultural significances with, Sinbad and Basra, which is the city that I was born, being a port city. Historically, Sinbad the sailor is supposed to be from Basra. I'm very happy to be talking about Emily of New Moon. It was very, very popular in Arabic-speaking regions. Of course, it was introduced when I already came to Canada. My family and I immigrated here after we were displaced from our home country in 1997. So Emily of New Moon is sort of like a newer contemporary anime, but I've been looking into it a lot. I've seen some episodes in Arabic, and I've spoken to a lot of family members and friends who know it very, very well. So I'm very excited to talk about that to you today. In my daily life, I work for a union. I'm very much for labor rights. In my spare time, I'm Indigenous solidarity, global Indigenous solidarity is very important to me. But my love for, anime subcultures, and anime specifically in a Canadian context and also in an Arabic speaking context, are two things that I'm very, very interested in. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you both about that today. Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming on. Yeah, I think you were just at a union conference, a big union conference this last week.
I was.
And you voted on some important resolutions there.
Absolutely.
That's great to see. Yeah. And yeah, I'm looking forward to learning about just sort of the Arabic region context, because I tried doing a little research on it myself, and I just kind of hit a wall. There was a limit to how deep I was really able to get with that.
Of course.
It's exciting stuff. Thanks again for coming on.
Thank you.
So just to give just a really brief introduction for this anime. So Kaze no Shoujo Emily, it adapts a series of novels by Lucy Maud Montgomery, who is best known as the author of Anne of Green Gables. The broad strokes are similar to Anne of Green Gables, but there are some pretty critical differences. In the beginning, Emily actually lives with her father, Douglas Starr, who's a poor journalist, but he dies of tuberculosis when she is 10 years old, and she finds herself adopted into her mother's side of the family, the snooty, stuck-up, and widely reviled Murray family. And she's, kind of reluctantly taken in at the New Moon farm, with her very ruthlessly matriarchal aunt Elizabeth.
There's a wonderful part in that first episode where it's just like, oh, so she lost her dear father and she now has to go off to live with the Harkonnens.
Yeah. That episode, the way that they capture just the whole meeting of what do we do with Emily? What do we do with this child? The whole way that was directed was brilliant.
Well, then there's a lot of touchstones of that kind of lost child thing where it's like the adults in the room are alternating between talking down to her and pretending she's not there. And yeah, it's this wonderfully unpleasant, just like, oh my gosh, who are these people that this girl has to deal with?
Yeah, and that's one of the key differences with Anne of Green Gables. She's taken in by just these strangers, whereas Emily is forced to confront these sort of deeper trenches of her own family that are very, very unfriendly to her. You have Aunt Elizabeth. There's also Aunt Laura and of course Cousin Jimmy, who are the more
nicer,
the more accommodating figures in her everyday life. We follow her through her adolescence, and she faces quite a bit more adversary in terms of just upholding her father's family legacy, and she also discovers her own passions for pursuing writing and creativity and navigating personal relationships, which tend to be a little more complicated, a little more strained, a little more tense than a lot of the relationships in Anne of Green Gables. She has her friends who are represented by, or she and her friends who apparently represented by the four temperaments as described by Montgomery. Emily is melancholic, Teddy is phlegmatic, Ilsa is choleric, and Perry is sanguine. People think I'm smart, but I did have to look most of those words up because I wasn't familiar with the four temperaments, but we'll get into all those folks later. Compared to Anne of Green Gables, Emily of New Moon is definitely, or the book, to, I would say, a lesser extent, the anime. But it is darker, it has a gothic tone. Sometimes it feels more, claustrophobic, despite the fact that it's being set against this, beautiful, inspiring Prince Edward Island setting. I was expecting that the anime was only going to cover the first novel, since the English title is Emily of New Moon. But I was surprised to discover that it actually, the last 6 episodes, very quickly cover the broad strokes of the second book, Emily Climbs. And they also kind of cover the third one, Emily's Quest. but not really. Also, I'm not quite sure what the public domain status of each of those books were at the time. I wasn't able. I was finding conflicting information on that.
Yeah, Montgomery wrote those in the 20s, right? The 1920s.
All three of them in the 20s. Yeah. Famously, the Montgomery estate is very protective of Anne of Green Gables, even though it is in the public domain. I don't know if they are quite as litigious when it comes to Emily of New Moon. But this was an NHK production, not World Masterpiece Theater, just to be clear.
Right.
So I'm sure that they, even if they had to pay for the rights to any of that material, that they were willing to do so. And but NHK, of course, does have its own legacy of making its own literary adaptations.
Oh, yes.
that went all through the 70s, 80s, 90s, and like this one in the 2000s. They did the Robin Hood show, Secret Garden. The Three Musketeers series was NHK.
Yep.
The Zorro anime was
yeah.
an NHK show.
That was a fun one, man.
Oh man,
NHK. That is treated as a mark of quality. If NHK co-produced it, you can usually trust that it's going to be pretty good. They helped get the 12 Kingdoms anime done. They did like the Hercule Poirot and Miss Marple anime that came out in the early 2000s.
Yeah, that was a close contemporary of that series. And of course, most recently they produced Anne Shirley as well.
Yep.
And I guess even technically, Nadia's Secret of Blue Water kind of falls under that NHK literary adaptation.
Oh yeah, bit. Yeah. I mean, my understanding is that NHK has more of a controlling interest in Nadia than Gainax ever did, and that was part of the problems that Gainax had, was that they never made money off of Nadia.
Yeah, I think that's who it gets licensed off of whenever it gets released here.
Yeah,
it is very much an NHK thing. Yeah, this series, they don't always use the same animation studios. They'll collaborate with different partners for each of these projects. It they don't have the same prestige or consistency as the World Masterpiece Theater series did. But this one was produced by TMS Entertainment, and it aired on NHK Educational in Japan between April 7th, 2007 to September 29th, 2007. So to put the timeline into perspective, it ran almost concurrently with Gurren Lagann week to week.
Yep. Except it was Saturday nights, and Gurren Lagann was Sunday mornings.
Yeah, the same weekend every day, but different days. And it did have at least one repeat broadcast as well. But it did not get that much airtime in Japan. I suspect it may have gotten more airtime in some other countries. So when I was going into this show, I know that 2007, or just the aughts in general, were not really a period known for strong literary adaptations, whether they were from NHK or World Masterpiece Theater. Both of those lines had, I don't want to say gone downhill, but they had lost a lot of momentum since the previous decades at that point. So my expectations were a little low going into this, but I did find the visual style was a little off-putting. It's a unique style because every character looks very distinct. The facial characteristics for almost everyone, there's not a lot of overlap. Everyone has a kind of realism to them, which is kind of, I guess there's maybe kind of an uncanniness to it that people find off-putting. I've heard people say this about the show's style. It isn't as immediately appealing. As I watched it, I found it has some great artistry to it, and it is also not a super accurate adaptation. They take a bit of a unique approach, or not a unique, but a different approach than what we might be used to with some of the more beloved literary adaptations that we've seen in anime.
Here's where you have me at a disadvantage because I didn't have time to read the books.
I guess I should also be clear. I have read the first book in this series. I have not read the second and third books. I thought they weren't going to be necessary until I got to those last 6 episodes, where I got a little taken off guard when they completely skipped the ending of the first book and jumped into the second book. And I didn't. I'm a slow reader, so I didn't really have time to go to those to read those second ones. But I'm familiar with them. So I am just curious to know. And Mike, we'll start with you.
Yep.
What is your background just with Montgomery's work in general? I know you haven't read this book, and this was your first time watching the anime.
Yeah.
But just what are your thoughts on her work and what you've seen before?
Well, what I've encountered of her work is, way back when I was a grade schooler, I read Anne of Green Gables. That was and thoroughly enjoyed that. I did watch some episodes of the series with Sarah Polley. That was I think that was aired on the Disney Channel in the U.S. or maybe PBS, but that was aired here as well as in Canada. And I of course have seen the anime by Takahata and Miyazaki, which is one of the best examples of the medium ever produced. So I'm quite familiar with Anne, and I saw this as an interesting contrast because Anne is a very hopeful character, and Emily is she comes in very downcast and troubled, and she's just lost everything and her world is changing and she's uncertain. Anne, on the other hand, despite being confronted by this big shuffling Matthew Cuthbert, she's just like, well, maybe things are going to work out here.
But things are get off to a much rockier start for Emily here.
For Emily, yeah.
Many people don't like Emily of New Moon as much. It was hard to find someone who was even willing to come on the show to talk about this.
Well, yeah, I'll be honest with you. Like I had heard of it, but before you brought it up with me, it's just like I don't think I ever really thought about it or pursued it. And one frustrating thing is a lot of the material I cover when I write about anime or talk about it on podcasts or produce commentary tracks, it's otaku centric or it's science fiction. It is targeted towards the enthusiast fandom enough that there's a lot of documentation, and there's not a lot of documentation about this series because it was a very, very kind of mid-list show produced in the mid 2000s. It wasn't very successful. Frankly, the fact that it does a whole bunch of the material right at the end of its run did have me kind of thinking, I wonder if they were planning for this to be a 52 episode series, and then at some point during pre-production or in production, we're just like, no, the sponsor doesn't want it. We gotta cut it down because there's not like a Roman album or a magazine book with all the production materials for Emily of New Moon. That's not something I was able to find because I always look for that stuff.
I was able to find a couple interviews. Just talking about very broad things about their approach to developing the series, but nothing that got to the point where where changes might have happened during the production of the series or why they might have had to make tough decisions later on in production or anything like that. The approach they took to adaptation was a lot of picking and choosing things, especially themes. When you look at the original book, they really decided to focus in on the threads with Aunt Elizabeth and Mr. Carpenter. That's sort of where they settled on. I think it was a pretty successful production overall. I like the show a lot.
Yeah, I think this is a very high quality show. It's one of those things that's just like, oh, this was overlooked. I think more people should watch this.
Absolutely, yes. And yeah, Shirley, your own background with Montgomery. I know you've talked a little about it already.
Yeah, so I mean, I grew up in Canada, so I'm very familiar with Anne of Green Gables. I watched the World Masterpiece Theater anime when I was younger, and then spoke to some of my cousins who came to Canada very late. One of them was born in Iraq and then was displaced to Syria and then came to Canada in 2014. A lot of the anime that he consumed were Arabic dubbed. And I remember him and I talking about Anne of Green Gables and him, mentioning that was the first time he kind of heard about Canada and was interested in the context of Canada and the region, etc. And I think it's like such an interesting, like multi-layered approach that like anime takes, which is like, the Japanese translation of what Canada looks into an anime, and then again the Arabic dub translating what the Japanese translation is of Canada. So it's like layers and layers of like translations and like storytelling and like multi-layered languages. So that stuff intrigues
that's the good stuff.
100%.
The good stuff.
100%. And also like Emily of New Moon, I actually learned about a couple of years ago. I think it may have been at watching like an obscure video on YouTube or something like that. And then Jesse, I think you spoke about it last year at one of your panels. Was that?
I'm pretty sure I brought it up.
You brought it up, and I was like, okay, yeah. I remember hearing about this, and I also thought that it was a World Masterpiece Theater production because at one point I was like really into like watching all of them because growing up I loved the Tom Sawyer's Adventures World Masterpiece Theater anime and Anne of Green Gables. And then so when I learned that another Montgomery story was being adapted, and then learned about the influence in the Arabic speaking region, specifically like Lebanon, in the Emirates, Iraq, and Syria. And I'm gonna like sometimes use like the Arabic version of the country and like the English version. So forgive me if I go back and forth between Syria and
That's fine.
Syria.
Yep, that's fine.
But yeah, like and I don't know much about Emily of New Moon as much as I do of Anne of Green Gables, but I have done a big comparison about them. But yeah, Emily of New Moon, I watched the anime with subtitled Japanese, and then watched a couple of episodes in Arabic. Never read the books, but I know family and friends who have read the books in Arabic. Don't know anybody who read the books in English, interestingly enough. And then Anne of Green Gables, I've read the books, like Mike mentioned, just in terms of being in Canadian school. Watched the anime and then watched the live action as well from like whenever it was, I don't know, eons ago. But yeah, that's kind of been my experience with Montgomery's work.
It's kind of funny when I hear people who grew up in other parts of Canada saying that Montgomery's work was something they encountered when they were in school, because not only were we were never required to read it when I was in school, and it just never really came up on any reading lists or anything that we were encouraged to read or anything, which is I guess in retrospect maybe kind of weird. Maybe it's just not something that's been embraced as much here on the West Coast.
Interesting.
Maybe I just wasn't paying attention.
You know what? I was very lucky that a lot of my teachers like really pushed like so-called Canadian literature. You know, we can discuss what that means, right? Like when I say Canadian literature, they weren't like when I was growing up, you know, Indigenous education was not a thing. You know, like we didn't learn about like Indigenous stories, First Nations, Métis, Inuit stories. Like when we talked about Canadian literature, it was very much like white settler European literature, and that included Anne of Green Gables. So I think it really depended like on like who you have as an educator. And I did have teachers that were really like, you know, we could read 1984, but let's read Anne of Green Gables instead. And I'm like, yeah, like that's great. Let's do it.
With not much of a background with Montgomery myself, my approach to Emily of New Moon has purely been around the context of the anime. I listened to the audiobook of the first book purely to enhance my appreciation of the anime series. That's kind of the whole reason I approach it. Just like with Anne of Green Gables, the reason I read the book was because I wanted to, you know, have a greater appreciation for this amazing thing that Isao Takahata yelled at many animators to create, and it certainly did, and I can certainly see that Anne of Green Gables was one of the best literary adaptations ever, because I think, as we said on that episode, the experience of watching the anime is equivalent to the experience of reading the book. I mean, that's how well it captures everything about Montgomery's writing. So this show, I feel, did not achieve that, but it definitely resulted with a very strong show that that was a lot better than I was expecting going in. As Mike touched on, we don't have a lot of documentation or resources about the background development of the show. We have a little information on the people who worked on it, right, of course, and there are some pretty big names behind it, or some people who've done some very significant work on some very big shows in the past. I'm not going to talk too much about Lucy Maud Montgomery because, again, back in episode 101, we went quite in depth into her story. Again, she was born in PEI in 1874, raised by her grandparents. She had a lonely childhood, grew up to become a teacher and writer. Anne of Green Gables was a huge hit around the world. It brought global attention to Prince Edward Island. She later moved to Toronto, basically became the most successful Canadian author of all time within her lifetime. Unfortunately, it wasn't known at the time, but she was for a lot of her life, and I think going back to the point where she was working on Emily of New Moon, she was suffering from depression, and a lot of that was because her husband was very mentally ill, and a lot of her life was spent trying to care for him, and he had some very unsettling problems apparently. But in 1921, Rilla of Ingleside was released, which I think was the 8th book in the Anne of Green Gables series, and it's generally understood that she was kind of getting tired of writing that series at that point and wanted to start fresh with a new character. And this was not long after she wrote her own memoirs. So Emily of New Moon, even though she put a lot of herself into Anne of Green Gables, Emily of New Moon is quite a bit more autobiographical, and which, you know, may not be too surprising, because there are a lot of similarities between Montgomery and Emily Birdstar. She also lost her father to tuberculosis and was raised by, her maternal family, who were very strict, and she was the only real child in the house at that time. So she kind of had to force herself to live in the world of imagination, much like Emily does. And she had basically a cousin Jimmy in her life as well, very poetic and childlike relative who reached out to her and connected with her a lot. And she wrote letters to her late mother, the same way that Emily wrote letters to her late father. Her circumstances in school were quite a bit more like Emily's than they were like Anne's. And in one thing that happens in Emily of New Moon is she burns all of her old writing. And Montgomery did something similar when she was 14 years old. She burned all her previous diaries.
Well, the scene in the anime is quite dramatic because she rugby tackles her Aunt Elizabeth away from the book when Elizabeth
Yes.
wants to see it, and then she burns it to prevent her aunt from being able to read her embarrassing childish stuff, because her aunt harps on her for writing fiction and writing poetry. It's just like, no, you should focus on the things that are practical. You can do some reading and writing if you want, but make it about history or economics or something. Don't bother with fiction. That's undignified.
I think they made the right choice in covering that material because when she goes off to high school, having her aunt explicitly forbid her from writing fiction, I think, is a very harrowing development, and I think it's a very very important thing to touch on for just that intersection of how she deals with her family and her emergence as a writer. One thing that the anime does not do that is quite prominent in the books is the books have this implication that Emily is clairvoyant. She has visions, and it's even suggested that she can connect with other people, or people can see her. She's kind of a new type in the books, actually, which is kind of curious. It seems curious that the anime would remove amazing Esper powers from a character rather than insert them.
I was going to say, usually that's the other way around.
Yeah.
That is very interesting.
Yeah, there's supposed to be like a spiritual undertone,
Right.
just from the artistic inspiration that she draws from the world around her, and apparently it's supposed to be connected to her Scottish heritage as well, which is kind of funny. This element from the books is also something from Montgomery's own experiences. One of her close friends as a child died when she was a teenager, and she had pondered over just her spirit and became really fascinated with things like Ouija boards. And I think that's kind of how she expressed that through her story, which when you're reading the books, it's kind of disarming because it feels like it feels out of place for the type of story she tells.
Right.
It is a little unfortunate that the anime chose to exclude it, but again, I think it goes back to just the adaptation choice of picking and choosing things and trying to stay focused on certain threads.
Well, I think the anime had to make the choice of only doing one sort of extrasensory thing, right? Because the extrasensory thing, the motif that is present in the anime is Emily talks frequently about the Lady of the Wind.
Lady of the Wind.
Yeah, which is sort of a personification of nature, but is specifically something that Emily references as, well, this is the inspiration for a lot of my writing. This is where it comes from. I'm hearing the Lady of the Wind talking to me.
Yeah, and I mean, it's very much part of that whole thing too. But the anime, and I think the anime expresses it very well. But yeah, there's a little more to it in the books at the end of the day. But yeah, it was as with Anne of Green Gables, the Emily of New Moon was translated into Japanese in the 1960s. The first book was released under the title Kawaii Emily. So it's a different title from both the original English title and the title of this anime. And as with Anne of Green Gables, it was translated by Hanako Muraoka, who is the woman that they made a 115 episode Asadora about back in around 2015 in Japan, which I have been meaning to watch because it is fully fan subbed. I guess I'm going to have to maybe do an episode on that in the future. But yeah, as I was suggesting, for the production of the anime itself, there's really not a whole lot to say because we don't have a lot of documentation about it to draw from. But as we pointed out, it's one of NHK's many literary adaptations. Like with Anne of Green Gables, the staff did travel to PEI, and they did a lot of reference work for the environments and the backgrounds and the setting. And it is very important that they did so because that's one of the strongest parts of this show. It approaches that kind of thing a lot differently than Anne of Green Gables did. But for a very early HD show, I think it does a very impressive job of injecting a lot of life into the environments and setting for Prince Edward Island.
I would say
always a very important part.
Yeah, and I would say that for much of the series, the first part of the series, like Autumn is a character in the series because it's like that's how much focus is placed on the colors and the leaves on the trees. You get a lot of scenes that are established with a maple leaf fluttering along the ground before the camera moves up.
For a lot of the historical details, they actually they used old Sears catalogs as a reference.
That sort of makes sense.
This one, this was an early HD series. I'm not sure if this was produced in widescreen or in full screen. There's some shots early on that kind of look like maybe they're cropped a little bit, which is kind of which is a little unfortunate because Emily has a very book accurate forehead with her.
Yeah, she's got the 5 head.
With the 5 head, and when you cut just the top of it off, that's
it's not flattering.
You really bring a lot of attention to it.
Yeah,
I was reading that the DVDs were in 4:3, but I haven't actually found any source material to show that, so it's possible. If that was the case, it gets better as it goes on and is not noticeable. But any version of any version of the show you will find will be in widescreen, pretty much, and it looks very good. It's not too much of a detriment. So the director of this series, so she is someone who is a very long time industry veteran, who works, mainly at Toei, but she hasn't directed many other things. But she has done some very significant work. She directed several episodes of Sally the Witch. Most notably, she's known for her work on Sailor Moon. She directed and storyboarded countless episodes. She's Harume Kosaka. And in Sailor Moon, she did the fitness episode. She did the first appearance of the Silver Crystal of Princess Serenity, Moonlight Night. She did the final episode of Sailor Moon S, and also she directed the first movie, which is not any of the 3 movies that are really considered movies, but the one that's just kind of a little recap,
right,
of the first season.
Yeah, I can expound on that quite a bit, just because I'll say the thing that the anime industry doesn't love talking about, which is that she's a very talented director that they didn't really give a lot of directing projects to because they don't tend to promote women into director roles in the Japanese anime industry. That's changing now, but especially in the 80s and 90s, it just wasn't a done thing, and it's kind of too bad. Kosaka is also a rare bird in that she's very good storyboard artist, and specifically she often works under the alias Yuki Hayashi when she's doing storyboards, and that's an old trick that you see with really proficient storyboard artists and animation directors. They'll use an alias so they can double up on work, so they can take more bookings and make some more money. And as a storyboard artist, she's definitely boarded or directed some of your favorite stuff recently. If you're listening, episodes of stuff like Birdie Wing, Laid Back Camp, the new Keith Courage anime, Majin Sozo Den Wataru. She is still pretty active at this point. I think she still boards a few episodes a year.
Most of her credits are directing episodes or doing storyboards or key animation, but it's very rare that she's had the opportunity to actually break through.
And her direction credits
as a chief director
are those credits are not the most auspicious ones. I think the first series that she directed as a chief director was something called Saint Beasts, which is actually a spin-off of the Angel Tales anime, Tenchi no Shippo, which if you remember your bad anime, you'll remember that one as that was the harem anime where there was the nameless featureless dude, main character, surrounded by all the cute girls who were reincarnations of his deceased childhood pets.
Yeah. Didn't have a lot of opportunities on big projects. This is one of the most, as chief director, this is one of the most high profile things that she's done. The screenwriter was the late Michiru Shimada, also very long time veteran who did a lot of writing for Toei stuff like Dr. Slump, Dragon Ball, One Piece. She's one of the lead creatives behind Little Witch Academia. From what I understand.
She did most of the scripts for that. My impression was definitely that she was selected for this because she wrote the screenplay for a series called Romeo's Blue Skies, which was one of the World Masterpiece Theater shows from the 1990s. She did most of those episodes. You can find a lot of information about her, about Michiru Shimada, because she is in her heyday, she was a good-looking lady and extremely articulate. So she did a lot of press and a lot of interviews. Like, you'll find older anime fans in Japan it's just like, oh, she was the beauty screenwriter, because she would actually show up in the magazines. But yeah, she did episodes of Urusei Yatsura, Dirty Pair, that weird Dog of Flanders anime that had an actual Flemish Bouvier instead of like the fictional dog from the World Masterpiece Theater one. And but yeah, she passed away a while ago, and I think Little Witch Academia was one of her last major projects.
I believe so, yeah. And also she did go on to also be one of the, I think she did I think she did the screenplay for Before Green Gables, the other Anne.
Oh, that's right.
From
yeah.
2009, a few years later,
Yep.
which I guess I got to talk about eventually. I'm not a big fan of what I've seen of that one, but there's a fair bit of overlap with that series as well. Mike, I think you have a little more insight on this stuff. Were there any other credits that stood out for you?
Well, the credits that stood out for me the most are, this was also, tragically pretty late in the career of the main actress, Tomoko Kawakami, who played Emily. She also famously played Utena in Revolutionary Girl Utena, and she passed away from ovarian cancer in 2011. So this wasn't too far from the unfortunate end of her career. It's always good to hear her. I think she's very versatile. She's good at sounding tough, but also tender. And so it was nice to hear her again. For me, the revelation, and this got me out of nowhere because I didn't look at the cast list that much, is Mr. Carpenter, the teacher.
Yes, Akio Otsuka.
Who was, the shaggy, stodgy older guy, who just turns out to be this wonderfully effusive influence on Emily. It's Akio Otsuka in like this incredibly warm, funny, emotional performance, and like this guy, he's like the voice of Solid Snake and Bato from Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah,
he completely steals the production for me. Like I was absolutely shocked, because it was just like he's one of those voices that I recognize immediately, and it's just like, I can't believe he's playing this kind of character and doing it so well.
Yeah, it was a total surprise from him. I not what I expected for that character at all, but yeah, he did a wonderful job. So the music for the show was by Akira Miyagawa. He did the music in the new Yamato remakes.
Oh, okay.
I found that the show leaned a lot on the opening credit music.
Yep.
What did you think? What did you guys think of the Japanese opening for this show? I think it's okay.
They're going for a specific sound. They're going for that kind of 70s Linda Yamamoto, folk rock thing that a lot of the World Masterpiece Theater shows did. And I think it's pretty good.
The score, again, leaned on that motif a fair bit. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't, but it was pretty effective overall. I really like the ending theme a lot. The sort of lounge music vibes in that one.
One thing I did do research on, because this is a subject area that interests me, is the fact that not only for the Arabic version, which was dubbed in 2010, but the Italian version, which didn't come out until 2011, they did their own theme songs that were not really related or adaptations of the Japanese theme songs. I always like it when they do that, because it's sometimes a very different vibe, and it's just like, I feel like that's going the extra mile to create original music. The Italian one, at least, is very much just like, it sounds much more like a contemporary pop song.
Yeah, and like in the Arabic version, the theme is kind of more like emotional. It feels like hopeful, very much less upbeat, very much about like an inspiring story. And that's like kind of the reason why the anime, the Arabic dub anime was so popular in the Arabic speaking region, was because during the time of the dub, and as always, there have been multiple, occupations and wars, and the production company and the channel, or sorry, not the production company, but the channel that it premiered on, Spacetoon, was kind of just all about that, like ideas of nature, ideas of reflection, and hope for youth. So the song very much reflected that, and it was composed by Tarek Al-Arabi Turgani. And his daughter, her name was Noor. And yeah, the lyrics are like super motivational, like things like, the days may seem like stagnant water, a moon that doesn't sleep, and cold nights, dreams look promising, darkness shines, the nights go down. Emily with patience, Emily's beauty, Emily, try, you won't fail. Obviously, those are like translations from Arabic, and translating it to English does not do it justice, but it is very much like more nostalgic and very much different than how the Japanese theme is presented.
Yeah, and Shirley, I was hoping you could tell us a little more about that dub and broadcast as well. Again, as I mentioned before, I tried to look into the context, and I just kind of hit a wall. There was only so much that I was able to parse through. I know that I was trying to read some articles that talk about anime in the Arabic speaking worlds. Like sometimes this show would come up. People would mention it in a list of their other favorite shows. But usually you're just hearing, Grendizer, Sandy Bell, and some people don't really want to get into any more depth about anime in the Arabic speaking world, even though that market has watched anime far beyond the 1970s and 1980s.
Absolutely.
And many other shows have had impact since then. And I know that when a show is like just really popular somewhere, it's normally just because it aired in the right place in the right time.
Yeah.
And that was definitely the case. That was to an extent, that was definitely the case with Emily on Spacetoon. But it seems that there may be more to why this resonated with people so much. And I know it from what I was reading it on like modern social media, like a lot of TikTok. Emily is something that shows up with anime fans in that crowd. I'm not sure if that's anything you know about, or maybe I'll just let you share your thoughts on that and not blabber on like this.
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah, definitely. So the dubbing station that did Emily of New Moon, the voiceovers with Arabic, they were handled by the Venus Center, which is in Arabic Al Zahra Center. It's a Syrian company. Its specialty is dubbing cartoons, not just anime, but like other types of cartoons as well. And it is located in Damascus in Syria. Well known for dubbing like UFO Robot Grendizer, which is extremely popular. Is like one of my dad's favorite shows ever. Awesome. Talked about it so much as a kid, and I grew up being like, I've never heard of Grendizer because like it wasn't popular in Canada, especially not in the States, but like the Arabic speaking region, it was huge. And my dad talked about it so much that I thought maybe that Grendizer was either Transformers or Gundam. But I found out much later that those are other very popular shows / anime. But yeah, it appeared on Spacetoon. Spacetoon was started broadcasting in the March of 2000 in Bahrain. The person who plays or does the voice of Emily is a really well-known Syrian voice actor. Her name is Raghda Al-Khatib. She was really connected with the character of Emily. She felt that like portraying her as like a passionate and headstrong young girl, very determined to navigate her way through like a very strict family and the pursuit of like writing and imagining. And I think it resonated with a lot of like young girls in the Arabic speaking region because of occupation and war and turmoil and all that, there was kind of like a need for some sort of hope. And because of so many different reasons around like, Japanese imperialism, as we, don't often talk about, and like what Japan did during the First World War, Second World War, and like how they kind of had a presence in the Arabic speaking region. There's a lot of Japanese companies in like Iraq that like were very influential. And when anime like Grendizer were airing in the 70s and 80s, like the streets of all of these like Arabic speaking countries were like empty because everyone was glued to their TV watching Grendizer. Everyone was glued to their TV watching Emily of New Moon. And like you mentioned, stuff like Sandy Bell. Like, fun fact, I know so many like young women, and like a lot of my cousins are named Sandy because of Sandy Bell. That's how popular that anime was.
I can see that for
very
sure.
Interesting.
100%. Yeah. And kind of the same as like the anime versus the books in like the English speaking region, there was also like a different name for the books that were translated into Arabic and the anime that was dubbed in Arabic. So Emily of the New Moon, which is Emily Al-Qamar Al-Jadid, that it was more of the translation for the books. And then Emily the Wind Girl, which is Kazuno Shoujo Emily, it's different, and that's what the animes usually refer to as in Arabic. So it's Fatat Al-Riya Emili.
So the translations for the book and the show are not consistent.
Correct. It wasn't until much later that like the anime kind of had like a popular presence on the internet, that there started to be fan dubs of it, like fan Arabic dubs, and they kind of stayed more true to the English dub of it. So then there are, like, if you search it, you will find both like Fatat al-Riya Emili and then Emili al-Qamar al-Jadid. So
what I thought you were going to say was that they went back and revised the book to be consistent with the anime because it was so popular. But it's notable that it was more the other way around, with fans actually redubbing it to bring it in line with the book. That's neat.
Yeah, I guess like other things I can say, like the Arabic dub is it uses like the modern standard Arabic MSA. So we call it Fusha. It's kind of like formal classical Arabic that is easily understood by many different dialects. So it does like it's kind of poetic because in the English translation, I guess, and like it's more like kind of like Shakespearean-esque, like the books. And I feel like the Arabic dub kind of stayed true to that, because the Arabic that they use is very like, you know, the Arabic that would you use in like news stations and formal settings. Not very it's not like region based or anything like that. So it's more poetic, and it also like kind of alludes to like the poetry and the gift of writing that like Emily has, right? Is like very much translated into the way that the anime is dubbed in Arabic. So I thought that choice was gorgeous.
I would venture that they try to make the characters sound educated, even the farmhand once he starts reading, right? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And but the cool thing is, like, usually in Arabic dubs of anime, the names usually change to kind of resonate more with the Arabic speaking audience. Like, for example, Captain Tsubasa in the Arabic speaking region is Captain Majid, right?
Captain Majid, yeah.
And in Emily of New Moon, they have the same names with just like an Arabic accent. So like Aunt Elizabeth is Amat Elizabeth. Aunt Laura is Amat Laura. Elsie is Elsie. Teddy is Teddy. And Perry is Birri. Like it's just like a little accent added. But I think it was also because it was very contextual to the Prince Edward Island. I think that's why they were like, you know what, we really can't change where this person is or where these characters are situated. So we can't give them Arabic names. We have to give them names that are specific to the context.
That's interesting. It makes me think of the Quebec Heidi dub, because the specific setting of Heidi did not stop them from giving those characters French names. But that's a little bit of an exception there.
That's interesting. Now, one thing I'm curious about this, because one thing I did notice too is that when Emily of New Moon was on Spacetoon, it was part of a larger programming block of shows for girls. Like, is that very much a done thing on those networks?
Yeah, I think like a lot of what Spacetoon really tried to do is like be very like naturey and like feminine and organic, you know? So that's why a lot of the audiences are like very much based on like young girls, whereas like previously in the 70s and 80s it was very much like all of these shows about adventure, like Sinbad the Sailor, like Grandizer, like, you know, Captain Majid. So I think they started to like realize, like with even the birth of the internet, that like, you know, young girls are watching these too, so we need to put a little bit more focus on that.
They seem to make room for a lot of shows too, because I saw listed on the block there was stuff like Little Princess Sarah, Alpenrose, Jewel Pet, like stuff that we never got in English at all. Yeah,
exactly.
So it was airing with all these other shows, but it feels like Emily was the one that stood out, even compared to the other girls shows it was airing with, and a lot of other anime that was running at the time. Because like I mentioned before, when we talk about anime in Arabic speaking countries, it always seems people always talk about it in a very historical context. It's always the older stuff.
Yeah.
But this is the first time I've heard of a newer show being this popular. And how much did it really stand out? I mean, how many other anime were airing at that time? I'm just curious what it was really what made it stand out in the crowd with all the other programming on Spacetoon.
I think a lot of it is just luck. Like there was they kind of picked out what anime they were going to dub and show, and that just happened to be the one. And it was it was actually like Spacetoon's. I don't remember if it was Spacetoon's most popular anime or if it was like the Venus Center's most popular anime. I have to double check on that, but it really resonated with people. It's like one of the most popular since, Grandizer.
It seems like they knew that it would.
Yeah.
Like maybe it wasn't just a completely random licensing situation where they saw this show, maybe had a connection with NHK or something, and knew something about this show would connect with the audience. It seems like it wasn't just it was maybe not just a matter of being in the right time slot at the right time. I don't know. This is I'm being completely speculative.
Well, I mean, we could talk about this angle for a long time. I mean, I found myself fascinated by the fact that this show struck me as something that NHK and TMS were clearly positioning as something that would be easy to sell to other markets around the world, but it didn't travel very far.
They did commission Ocean Studios to make an English language trailer for this, but don't get excited because it's only the narration is in English.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say, yep. That's very, very typically how it's done. So you got like a 3 to 5 minute trailer where it's just one voice talking about what the show is about. But yeah, they dubbed this in Tagalog, and as far as I could find, they dubbed it in Albanian, and there were 2 separate companies that dubbed it in Kurdish.
I mean, Kurdish is it's one of the official languages of Iraq too, so I can totally see how that worked out.
Yeah, there was a dubbing database, and it listed one of them. It wasn't even a TV broadcast. They were trying to sell it direct to video, and it's just like, I wonder what it was like selling videos and DVDs in that part of the world in the 2000s.
It's also really interesting about we talked about the mystical aspect that was kind of erased in the anime adaptation. It was even more kind of stripped down in the Arabic dub. They made it really seem like Emily has a deep connection with nature and visualizes this wind woman as a maternal comforting entity, but it's not supernatural. And I think again that is kind of like the localization of a lot of Arabic speaking countries are majority Muslim, and so it really had to be culturally appropriate. Even some of the animations were redone to have longer sleeves. Some of the relationships that were romantic at the end, even in the books, they were kind of stripped down to be more platonic, and the relationship between Teddy and Emily was not really explored until they get married. But spoiler.
I should have said we're going to spoil everything in this.
Sorry.
Podcast,
yeah.
It's okay.
But yeah, I think it really made sure that the Arabic version really made sure that Emily was just a highly perceptive, super smart, having an answer revealed to her through prayer and faith, as opposed to this supernatural imagination that she has. But it may seem different to some viewers because I think you and I were talking about this, Jesse, a little bit over Instagram, where the visualization of the Wind Woman and Emily's imagination is more vivid in the Arabic dub. But again, so you think does she have magical powers? But it's really just the over explanation of her visuals and her dreams just make it seem more magical, but really it's rooted in prayer, faith, etc. Things that are realistic to the audiences that are viewing the show.
Yeah, it really sounds like they just kind of massaged things a little bit in that
100%,
dub. They're not outright changes or really fundamental changes or anything like that. They just kind of flattened it out in some places, or maybe recontextualized things just a little bit in other places. It's not too wild in the adaptation based on the original. But totally. I actually didn't realize that they did digital modification to the animation in some parts as well, which I guess is still a common thing in broadcasters.
Absolutely.
That. Yeah. There was one thing I sort of touched on. I don't know how true this is, but apparently this is a popular cosplay choice for Emily is a popular cosplay choice for Arab content creators, or it shows up on TikTok and YouTube a lot. Do you know if that's true, or what that claim might be referring to?
I can't speak too much about that,
That's
but
okay.
my prediction is I think now that we see kind of like a big cultural shift in what is comfortable for non-English speaking content creators to share. I think there's this like, I think it's maybe like a millennial generation thing, millennial, like Gen X, and also I guess you could say Gen Z kind of started this, where like they're comfortable being like, these are the experiences of how my parents and my families in different regions in the kind of consumed pop culture and anime, and they're valid too, right? Like this whole like these stories of diaspora and like nostalgia for homelands is really coming out, and a lot of content creators are embracing it. And I think people are searching like what anime were popular in the Arabic speaking region, and they're like bringing that to life, bringing more awareness of like, these are the things that we consumed and my parents consumed, and I want to share that now in this current diaspora setting of my host country. And I think that's why it's starting to become more popular, and I think we're going to see more and more of that, especially with like the rise of nostalgia like across the board, and just like this need of like sharing cultural experiences that may not be mainstream or the norm in the context of like Canada and the United States.
This is a show that just completely came and went in Japan, and even for the English language, online anime fandom. Frankly, I think we're lucky that this even got fan subbed, and that we're even able to watch the whole thing.
Yeah.
But yet in this context, it's something that just continues to come up on modern social media in the Arabic speaking world too, which is it's fascinating.
It's super fascinating.
The version of it that you can get fan subbed appears to be made from web rips of the episodes taken from Amazon, and then English fan subs that were made like a decade ago.
Okay, yeah.
And that's very interesting.
That's the version I watched. I will say it looks pretty good. Holds up.
Oh yeah,
great
visually
it's
absolutely fine. I did make one note. There was an episode where at one point Emily she's expressing that she's really upset about something, and the line in Japanese is like "sugoku kotoeru mono." It's like I'm really upset. The subtitle translates it as "I'm in a state of extreme rage." It's like that's overstating it a little, just a little. That was one of those. It took me out of it for a second. It's just like, wait a minute, rewind that. I want to hear that line in Japanese again. That's not what she's saying. It's just like, it's not far from it, but yeah, that's overstating it. But that's what you get with amateur translation. It's people doing it for the love of it.
I have a question for you both. What do you think of like the depiction of like cats in the story, both in the books and in the anime?
So that's interesting because that's something I wanted to get up into in the differences between the book and the anime. In the anime, she had 2 cats in the beginning.
Yes.
And one of them died. And that is one of the first most noticeable things you'll see in this that was changed. I know that Montgomery liked cats. They tie in with Emily very thematically in a lot of ways in this. And going back to Anne of Green Gables, when I read the book, there wasn't a lot of emphasis on cats in the original text, if I recall. It's been a while. But I did notice that the anime the Takahata anime adaptation of Anne of Green Gables has a lot of cats. Cats show up a lot. Yeah. There's a lot of cat imagery, a lot of Anne interacting with cats around at her home, which I found to be a very curious change. And that's kind of what made it not surprising to me when I read the book Emily of New Moon and found that her passion for cats had such a strong tie to creative voice and inspiration.
I just remember that she had the cat that she smuggled along with her, Saucy Sal, and I remember a sense of disappointment when she was away at school or in an outing and Saucy Sal has kittens, and we see the picture of the mom and the cats, and then we never really see the kittens again. We see Sal again, but not the kittens.
That's true. They did kind of not follow through with that properly in the anime version.
Other than that, I remember the cool black cat that the priest had in his house.
Yes.
I have a really like, maybe this theory is a bit of a reach, but I want to share with you anyway as to why Anne of Green Gables and Emily Newman was popular in Arabic speaking regions, and it has to do with cats.
So Anne of Green Gables was popular there. It did. Okay,
it was. Yeah. They changed Anne's name in Arabic to be Shamam, I believe it was Shamam. Again, to resonate with the youth consuming it, but. So the major religion in the Arabic-speaking region is Islam, and cats are highly revered and celebrated in Islam, right? they're permitted to like roam inside houses and mosques, and they're seen as blessings. So I'm like, you know what? Maybe like the respect that cats are shown in both of these shows, on top of like the strong female characters empowering young people, maybe that's one of the reasons why it was popular. It's just like, this is something that was culturally relevant to a lot of Arabic speaking people with that majority religion. And I don't know, maybe I'm reaching, but I'm like, there's something interesting about cats, Islam, and like the Arabic dubs of these anime. And this is me speaking as someone who's non-Muslim. Like I'm Assyrian. We're indigenous to parts of Iraq, Iran, Syria, and Turkey. Our homeland is Beth Nahran, and we speak a Semitic language that is not Arabic, but we grew up in an Islamic context, right? So I think about these things, and I think it's super interesting. And I don't think people sat down and were like, we're going to show these two shows because their cats are great. But I'm like, there has to have been some sort of subconscious like decision making. I don't know. I just want to bring it up.
I don't know about decision making, but I like the cats don't stand out that much in this show, but it seems like it could very much be part of the tapestry of why it resonated with people.
Yeah, I'm absolutely, I'm absolutely willing to
to
believe that, and I would venture that, well, if Emily of New Moon, if instead of a cat that she brought with her, she had a dog, it might have hit differently.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
If she had a dog, it would be a completely different story.
That's true too.
Yeah,
I agree. And
yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Just the idea of like how cats are seen roaming the streets in the Southwest Asia region versus like dogs, for example. Like I was just recently in Beth Nahran, which is now called Iraq, and stray dogs are like taken care of, but they're not like welcomed into homes the way cats are. So it's just like, interesting things to throw out there.
It could just be that little bit of drama from the first episode where she's trying to smuggle the cat in. I mean, that could have been what sold it. That could be enough.
That's it. That's the tweet.
As I mentioned, there's two cats in the original, and in this one there's just one. So that's an example of how this story is softened quite a bit. It has a lighter tone than the original books. There's a real kind of gothic atmosphere to the original books, which is just kind of not as obvious in the anime version. Even though they keep going to haunted houses on multiple occasions in this show, which kind of didn't happen in the books.
Interesting.
But it's definitely less gothic. Emily is, I mean, she's certainly a brat in this show. She is a way more of a brat in the books. And they made a lot of conscious decisions around that. I know the realization of the setting and the way she was characterized were things that were really labored in the show's production. And the fact that she softened quite a bit, I think maybe it was a little bit of a compromise for just making the show more friendly to audiences, or thinking that the audiences would be more accepting of a character who wasn't so didn't have as many rough edges. As I was touching on before, they cut off the end of the first book, which I found really shocking. Around episode, I think it was 18 or 19, when we find out the backstory of Ilsa's mother. How the original book ended was they actually believed that her mother had run off with another man, and that's why her father was so depressed. But what happened was Emily had a fever and started having visions of Ilsa's mother in having fallen down a well. And then they discover that they actually find her body at the bottom of the well, revealing that her mother had not run off with another man and left PEI on a boat, but she had actually died.
That's poignant, but a little disturbing.
Oh
yeah, it is. But again, that was the first example of her having her new type powers.
Mm-hmm.
So you can, maybe I shouldn't have been surprised that they cut that, actually, but it did take me off guard a little bit. I thought they were going to engage with that more. But what they did work ultimately, and I think getting into that, that second book was really important, because I think that the conflict with Emily and Aunt Elizabeth throughout that story was a good direction to go. I think one of the most controversial changes is with the character Dean Priest. So he only shows up a couple times in the anime, but one very notable thing about Dean Priest in the book is that he is a creep. and that he actually is engaged, despite being 20 years older than Emily. He's actually engaged to her at one point. Later on in the second book, he is.
Well, I'll admit, when he
was waiting for her.
When he showed up in the anime, I was a little bit worried. Just like, they're not going to go with the romance angle with these two, right? Please.
They do go in that direction in the books. Now, they don't ultimately end together. She still gets with Teddy at the end in the final book. But there is a period where she is with Dean, and that is why it is so interesting to me that they changed it so that Dean is instead married to Aunt Nancy.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely done just to make Nancy seem like this sort of weird badass. I guess it has this husband half her age. That kind of brings me to the other thing I wanted to talk about in terms of the themes that they chose to stick with in this series, because a lot of it focuses on, as the books did, just sort of these philosophies on family, which are really focused on like the matriarchal figures. You have Elizabeth, you have Aunt Nancy, and you have Aunt Ruth, who are all what family is and how it should work. And Emily is to different degrees at odds with them, but maybe at the most with Elizabeth.
Well, they have to live together. I think I really found Aunt Ruth an enjoyable character because she was just so utterly unpleasant every time she showed up.
Yes, she was unpleasant in the greatest way.
Yeah, just very entertainingly so. Just like not only like disapproving of Emily, but very 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 brusquely and rudely saying just like, you're not behaving right. You really got a mouth on you, kid. It's just like you're stomping around here with your shoes untied. You're filthy. And then she has this wonderful face turn in episode 21 when Emily goes off to high school and has to live with her, and she's still just like, you talk too much. I'm sick of dealing with you all day. And Emily's just like, Aunt Ruth, I got suspended. And Aunt Ruth is like, you what? The principal did what? Oh, I'm gonna get him.
Yeah.
You're a Murray girl now, and Murray girls don't take any guff from anybody. And just like, oh, that's great.
Yeah, so it's kind of the same-ish thing in the Arabic dub, but as I mentioned before, like, it kind of reshapes some of the themes around family to go along with like traditional, cultural values in the region. Very much focused on like honor and like emotional growth, family duty, and kind of like the duty to like take in an orphan. Like extended family has to do this. They kind of have no choice. They like the preservation of reputation, like, around like Aunt Elizabeth's like strictness. It's framed more of like as like safeguarding the family's social standing and pride, as opposed to like this like unhinged matriarch.
Elizabeth possibly just goes much too far with it a lot of the time, and as we find at the end, it's really her own just her own baggage that kind of provokes her to act that way a lot of the time. And it is I am glad that they chose the thematic thread to kind of bring us to the end of Elizabeth's character, where she finally comes to terms with that and is able to kind of realize how she's on the same page as Emily on a lot of things, and even opens up to the point where she accepts her story. I don't know if her retribution at the end is enough to justify just how awful she is in the beginning, just like insulting Emily's father at his funeral. But from what you're saying, it sounds like the Arabic version stays very faithful to that exploration of family and the different philosophies behind it. And maybe that is another reason why it resonated so much, because it had such strong so much to say about that.
Very much that. And it's like the resonation with Arabic speaking youth is around like how strong matriarchy is. And I think it's like interesting because, in Western Orientalist kind of narratives of the so-called Middle East, we see that it's dubbed like a patriarchal society. Women don't have rights, like all these like nonsense things that are very untrue. Whereas like, look at the anime that were resonating with the Arabic speaking youth. It was the ones about like women achieving great things, women being imaginative, matriarchs having like power and protecting their families, total opposite of like the Western gaze of what like the Swana region is all about. Right. So I think it's a lot. It shows like it gives proof of like, these Orientalist narratives are just not it.
One of the most interesting episodes of the series for me is an episode where Emily is getting a little older, and she gets a job where a family hires her to write a memorial poem for a guy named Peter de Geer.
That was one of my favorite episodes.
And she really struggles with it because like the first part of it is about her being like, well, this he doesn't seem to have been very well liked or accomplished anything. So what am I even going to say? And she struggles terribly with this. And then she gets the perspective, and she's just like, well, he struggled all his life, and that alone is worth something. Was that something that was a big theme in the books?
That was not in the first book. That actually gets back to how it approaches adaptations. A lot of the episodes are not direct adaptations of events from the books, but they get at things that are mentioned or sort of threads that carry on, and that certainly is a lot of the underpinning of Emily's struggles with creativity and how to find her own motivation and express herself. I found that one was very in line with the source material.
Okay.
And that was a real standout episode for me. Just chiming in as I edit, this was really bothering me, so I went back and checked, and I can confirm that the story that Mike's talking about here, about Peter de Geer, was taken almost directly from Emily Climbs, which is the second book, which I hadn't read. There were a lot of episodes that kind of that take various threads from the books and create original stories with them that I didn't feel worked quite as well. Early on, there's the episode where they put on the production of, I think it was Midsummer Night's Dream, around episode 5. So that's something that they had talked about doing in the books.
Right.
They didn't actually put on a production. It felt,
Yeah,
I
they,
think it,
they
I
wrote
think
their
it
own
did
little
work.
skits, right? Yeah.
Yeah, they
And
wrote their own little, yeah.
That seemed a little clumsy.
It did. And
Yeah.
the other time was when, so at Rhoda Stewart's birthday party, when, and also on a note about the characters all looking different, I think it is hilarious that Rhoda Stewart looks exactly like Asuka from Evangelion in this show. But at her birthday party, when her father invited the actress, that actress,
Josephine.
Josephine,
Yeah.
to come. So that is a character who is mentioned at some point in the books, but does not. That event did not take place, and I think in that particular episode, it really does not feel like something that that Montgomery would have written, and I thought it really stood out. But for the most part, I found that the way it recontextualized material from the original did work pretty well. I found it was pretty effective most of the time. I'm sure you also noticed that one of the early episodes was identical to an episode from the original Anne of Green Gables anime from the 1970s. The story where, or the episode where Lofty John leaves the apple out and Emily eats it and she believes she's eaten a poisoned apple.
Yeah, that was kind of weird. Although I liked Lofty John in general just because of the whole
Yes.
oh, he's a crazy guy that lives out in the woods. Every child's book needs one of those.
That was directly adapted from the book, and Anne of Green Gables, the Isao Takahata version, basically used that story from Emily of New Moon as filler in their anime because they didn't have quite enough material to pad out 50 episodes. Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, so I was very funny to see that adapted again. It was approached just a little differently, but it was kind of the same thing.
And it's like that's like adaptation as recursion, and like that's kind of cool. That's very interesting. I wonder if there's a version of that scene in the new Anne of Green Gables, the Anne Shirley show that came out a couple of years ago, because I haven't gotten around to watching that yet.
I'm going to guess probably not, because that one actually adapts the first 3 books.
Yeah.
So they probably don't have a chance to fit it in, but I've only watched 4 episodes so far.
Man,
so I have not.
I'll tell you though, the nerve of Crunchyroll dubbing that series in English in Texas and not in at least in Toronto.
Texas, yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Oh boy, I could go on about that.
Wouldn't have cost them any more money. They could have used local Canadian talent. It would have felt more authentic. And like, why? What for?
Yeah.
Chaps my hide.
Yeah, it was a big disappointment. I guess another thing we should talk about is the characters, or at least our primary 4 characters, Anne, Teddy, Perry, and Ilsa. Shirley, I'm curious how we have these 4 different types of characters as our kind of primary cast. We talked a lot about how Emily might resonate with people in the Arabic speaking world. What are your thoughts on the other characters? And do you think that, how do you think that, was there any differences in the way they were adapted, or were they all pretty very similar to what we know from the original material?
I think overall they're a little bit more similar than they were adapted. Ilse, like she's like still loud, like highly energetic, like very much like a tomboy-esque. And I think that like idea of a tomboy is very much like represented in a lot of like Arabic speaking media. That like idea of like a young girl or a woman who acts more masculine is like there is a word for that. Teddy, for example, Teddy in the Arabic dub loves drawing, painting. He's one of her best friends, and they're both kind of like kindred spirits where like they're both trying to achieve this like artistic dream, one as an artist, one as a writer. Other characters I'm trying to think of, Perry, still kind of the same thing, hired as a handyman. He grew up like disenfranchised, but he studies and ends up becoming like a successful lawyer. So nothing really changed in terms of that. I think just like this idea of like this adventure of like there's a main character and then she finds her people that are very much kind of on the same path as her. I think that resonates of like, you know, around the themes of like friendship, adventure, and just like kindred spirits. So nothing really changed for the Arabic version, I don't think. But I would be interested to hear if anyone else kind of thinks the same. Again, the only really real difference is almost all of the characters are seen as like platonic friendships as opposed to anything else that is explored in the other adaptations.
Pretty understated.
The other
it's not really until they go to high school that it's even really openly discussed. I mean, it's like
Totally.
Intuitively, I felt like, oh, as soon as Teddy and Perry were introduced, just like, okay, these are the guys that are gonna kind of be competing for Emily's attention. Just like, no, they don't really hit that too hard until late in the series.
It was a little messier. It's a little messier, a little more complicated in the source material. I did feel that, you know, I think it was for the best they didn't focus on romance too much.
Yeah,
it's very tidy the way that they do it in the end. You have this well balanced cast of 2 boys and 2 girls. It's very, very, very clean. Not a whole lot of not a whole lot of drama.
Elsie, her like, you know, she's like the kind of like the untamed tomboy with an explosive temper is shown to be a little more comedic, like huffing and puffing as opposed to like being like having a temper tantrum or whatever. Like super energetic and clumsy as opposed to like having like a lot of rage. But one character that was very specifically different is I forgot her name. Teddy's mom. What's Teddy's mom's name?
Eileen Kent.
Thank you. Yes, Eileen. Yeah. So she's shown to be like super toxic, like kind of like wild and like borderline like super abusive and like possessive. Teddy. In the Arabic dub, it's more seen as like a stern overprotectiveness, just like super strict, like wanting Teddy to focus on his studies, and like really scrubbing around like away the kind of like darker tones of like domestic abuse, which is a little bit more implicated in the non-Arabic dub, I think.
Yeah, the impression that I got with Teddy's mom is that like in the Japanese version was just that she was desperately protective of him because he was all she had in the world, and what that implies. And my understanding was that in the book she was also just kind of socially jealous. She resented the fact that Teddy got to go out and have friends and have a life while she had to be the one parent that worked all the time.
I think it's important to emphasize that all of our main cast come from some degree like broken homes or single parents to some degree, and how then the type of impact that has on those characters is something that's highlighted quite well, I think, in both the original and the adaptation. I will say, I think Ilsa's my favorite character in both the book and the show. I think they do a really good job of really showing her range from being like really tough on the outside, but being able to have managed relationships and friendships on different levels with her friends. And I really, especially, this is why I'm glad they didn't focus too much on a romance, because I much prefer the platonic relationship between Emily and Ilsa. I think it's one of the strongest things in the show. I just love how it, even just over the course of just the first couple of episodes, it grows from something that's very tense to something that's very, very to a really sweet connection between those two characters. And with, you know, going back and comparing to Anne of Green Gables, and again, I'm sure people know a lot more about Montgomery's personal life than I do. Some people seem to know a lot about her. It really seems that like the relationship between Anne and Diana in Anne of Green Gables was really aspirational, maybe more like the type of friendship someone wishes that they had. But Ilsa, relationship between Emily and Ilsa, it's a little messier, and something that kind of has to be earned through, a little bit of hardship. I think one of my I can't remember if this was really in the book because it has been a while, but I think my favorite scene in this series is when they're all getting ice cream on the beach and Emily is trying to write a verse in her book, and Ilsa distracts her. She either hits her or dropped ice cream on her. I can't remember exactly how the scene played out. And then Emily just gets furious at her because she lost her train of thought, and the moment, little bit of inspiration that she had was just gone forever.
Ilsa stuck a piece of ice down her dress. That's what happened.
It was a piece of ice down her dress. Yeah. But I thought that was a really a really great moment between those two characters. Kind of said everything about them, and it's highly relatable if you've ever had a really inspired thought and then just didn't write it down and completely forgot it 5 minutes later.
It was a nice character moment of they get very upset with each other, but then Emily is just like, well, wait a minute, I know what I did wrong, and that girl's my best friend, so I know exactly what she did and where she went, and she just goes and gets her.
Yes, we've already talked about a lot of episodes and moments that stuck out. Were there anything else that really stuck with you from the show or really stood out?
Oh, sure. I liked the episode. It was episode 8. I took notes on this. It was the one where they finally explore Emily's mom's secret room, because at the Murray household, Emily's her bedroom when she lived there is still there, but no one is allowed to go in there. The family is obviously really tense and upset that this lady died young, and no one wants to talk about it. And eventually, Emily is allowed to go in there. Her Aunt Elizabeth finally opens up with her a little moment, and then they share a moment. That episode was storyboarded by a guy named Junji Nishimura, and that caught my eye because he's kind of gone everywhere and done everything. He was a major influence on one of my favorite directors, Yasuhiro Imagawa, who did Giant Robo. But Nishimura directed an outrageously fun series called Pro Golfer Saru. It was basically just like a gimmicky sports anime about golf. Kind of a gag thing, but like he did like True Tears, he did Zenki, he did Bakuan, which is like a show from about 10 years ago about girls on motorcycles. He's kind of done every job in the book, and he just does a really good job putting together a bunch of character moments in this episode and revealing a little bit more about Emily's life and her mom.
Yeah, I do really like just the very gradual reveal of things like that, and how she hates having to deal with her mother's side of the family, but is like kind of gradually just forging a connection with her mother.
The specific motif is a rainbow, and I really dug the fact that Emily's mother Juliet was just like, oh, I'm going to leave this place and start a family, and I want to have a little girl and name her Emily, and she hits her when she sees a rainbow, and she tells this to her family, and then later, many years later, Emily, runs up to Aunt Elizabeth and says, "Hey, I can see a rainbow out the window," and that is what makes Elizabeth go, "Let's go to your mother's room. Let's look out that window." It was cool. I like that a lot.
I think my favorite episode is episode 12, "The Only Song in the World," where she kind of realizes that Mr. Carpenter is kind of like her mentor. Like she's like super misunderstood. She goes into the woods, and weirdo Mr. Carpenter is like super talented and encourages her to kind of like do her thing. I think it just resonated with me. Like, it has nothing to do with like the dubs, any of the dub adaptations, but just resonated with me as like, someone who also, while going to school as a new immigrant, really being kind of like, my teachers really encouraged me to do the things that I really wanted to do. Like I used to draw a lot, and like the teachers thought it was cool. The kids, my fellow students were kind of like, why are you drawing Dragon Ball Z characters? Like, aren't you a girl, kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
So just like the idea of like teachers being your champions, even if they're like, often like the mean teacher or like someone who is seen as like someone who is like off-putting ends up being like your biggest champion. So it's just like, as me growing up as a kid in the elementary school system, it like resonated with me for sure.
Yeah, and I do like how Mr. Carpenter is, he doesn't get too much screen time throughout the series, but he makes such a big impression every moment he's, you see him and he's interacting with Emily and encouraging her, and you really see that inspiration, or the way that he inspires her is conveyed really well. And yeah, it's really sad when he dies at the end. They do the fake out where he's just like, "Oh no, I'm perfectly fine," and then he's like, "Oh wait, no, actually you are dying, and you are going to die at the end of this episode."
Yeah, they leave that dangling thing of, well, it's up to his will to live, so maybe he'll pull through. It's like, that's kind of mean. If he has a terminal illness, his willpower doesn't really enter into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, episode 12 I liked that episode too, because that was a very big moment of Emily at that point has had many small successes, little triumphs like writing the play, things like that. This was the first time where she submitted a poem to the newspaper and then went around telling everyone, "Hey, I'm going to be in the newspaper," and then the newspaper didn't print her poem. So that's the first time she really fails dramatically in a public way and has to try to account for that.
And I do like the detail of when Cousin Jimmy buys all of the newspapers.
He tries to hide the bad news from her
about it, but
so sweet.
He carves it on the plaque, and it's so sweet. Jimmy is great. I don't think that Montgomery ever described him as having a Jufro in the book, but it conveys his fun, childlike nature.
He's the one member of the family who got the frizzy curly hair.
It's funny, in the book, they talk about how, as I can't remember if they mentioned this in the anime because it's been a while since I watched the early episodes, but they talk about how as children, Aunt Elizabeth pushed him down a well, and it is speculated that the reason that he is, very, very, very childish and kind of lighthearted is because he hurt his head and had brain damage. It's never confirmed. It's kind of also suggested that people say that and he just leans into it and just yeah, that's what happens. You can really tell Montgomery is tapping into something very personal with the way she writes that character and the way he encourages and connects with Emily. It's really well done in this anime. One other character I wanted to just give a brief shout out to is someone who does not show up for very long. When they go to high school, we do, in episode 21, 22, we briefly get to meet Emily's other rival. So we have Rhoda through most of the series, but then we have Evelyn.
Yeah, the horrible gossip of Shrewsbury High School.
Who they almost go full Ojo-sama with her, but not quite. Mm-hmm. But yeah, she... Yeah, they really rushed her storyline a lot, but I do appreciate that they left it in. I like the whole thing where it turns out that she was just plagiarizing everything all along.
Yeah. The cool thing too about the high school thing is they all get outfit upgrades. They'll get new costumes. That's a very anime kind of thing.
Emily's costume, it looks very close to a high school uniform.
It made me think of Tokimeki Memorial, if you've ever seen that the dating sim game from the 90s, same colors. A little bit, yeah. Did you guys have any just final thoughts talking about things that stood out or things you liked about the series?
I just think it's really fascinating how popular it was in the Arabic speaking region. We've talked a little bit about why that might be the case and some theories around it, but I think it really is kind of an ode to just youth having so much voice and so much opportunity to create content that honors the experiences of their families and their kin in that region, and kind of bringing those stories into the diaspora. So I'm glad that the first kind of Arabic dubbed anime that I got to speak about in a public setting in Canada is Emily of New Moon. So this was really cool. And, the character of Evelyn is very interesting in the Arabic dub too. It's, she's kind of still the same snobby intellectual, but her Arabic is super classical.
Okay.
Yeah, she's masks her jealousy with being super polite, sarcastic, and dramatic. It's even more kind of posh than the classical Arabic that is used throughout. So I think it was kind of just a way to make her seem like she's nose in the air kind of thing, and more of a literarian than Emily is. So I thought that's
a nice touch.
Yeah,
nice
absolutely.
Touch,
Yeah, what I liked about this series is, first of all, it operates without too much guile or mystery. What you see is what you get. It's nicely straightforward. The characters are interesting, but not really shocking or inconsistent. And what I appreciate about it is that it never really gets out over its skis in the way that a lot of anime productions do, especially newer ones. Like, inevitably, there's an episode that is sloppy, or something doesn't look right, or there are technical problems. This show is extremely consistent. None of the episodes look sloppily or poorly written or deficient in any way. And I was honestly just surprised I hadn't really seen it or seen it talked about before now, because I think this is a very high quality series. I have had in the past business relationships with TMS. I was involved in the dubbing of a show called Banania some years back that they own the rights to. So their chief executive in North America, a guy named Sam, like the next time I see him, I'm going to be like, hey, why don't you put this on YouTube with subtitles so people can find it and watch it?
Yeah, I was gonna ask what you two thought about the prospects of just getting this show out there and how successful it could be as a release. And personally, I think it would not do very well as like a discotheque or Animego release.
I'd agree. Yeah.
If they did a lot of legwork to get it visible on like a disc release visible on Canadian store shelves, or it's highly accessible on Canadian streaming services, I think it would find an audience that way. But I know at least one of those companies definitely would not do that. So it's just not the approach you'd normally take with those kinds of releases. So it wouldn't do well. But just getting it on YouTube, even if it's not in on the biggest streaming service or the most visible, even if the algorithm's not pushing it under everyone's eyes, just getting it out there, I think some people would find it and some people would really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, the YouTube angle is something that TMS manages themselves. So for me, that it's eminently possible for them to just get it up there. And I think that the show has traveled enough that you will find fans from the Gulf countries or from the Philippines who are looking for episodes, and they're just like, well, it's not the language I watched when I was growing up, but this is the same show, so let's watch it. And I think it could find some success that way.
To finish off, there is one more stray thought I wanted to bring up, and there's one neat thing in the books is that there's extended portions where you're seeing Emily write letters to her father, and she makes lots of spelling errors, which is a really cute detail that doesn't get conveyed very well in a lot of adaptations. Even if you're listening to the audiobook, you will not catch the fact that she's making those misspellings. But I do really like how in the ending credits for this show, where it actually shows portions of the text on the screen, and you actually get to see some of those spelling errors in those text selections that you see running across the screen in the ending credits. And I don't know if that was if the intention was to just show the spelling errors and get that element of the original work in the adaptation, but it is there, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, it's beautiful too. Even in, they do the same thing in the Arabic. Is like there's like confusing letters, like swapping phonetically similar letters, like ta and ta in the Arabic, putting like certain accents on wrong positions or omitting them entirely, and like just the slipping up of like basic classical Arabic word structures. I'm not a linguist. I have friends that like I totally want to talk about this more. That are like familiar with like Semitic languages, but yeah, it was very obvious in the translation, or sorry, in the Arabic adaptation as well.
I want to reach back to something from early on in the episode. Now, I understand, Shirley, you're a big fan of Digimon. Is that correct?
I sure am.
Did you happen to notice that Aunt Elizabeth's voice, that's Toshiko Fujita, that's the voice of Tai in the first two Digimon seasons?
Absolutely.
Very different performance. Very different.
Extremely different, but such a like noticeable voice for sure.
No, my favorite piece of trivia when working on research for this was like Toshiko Fujita was also the English or the Japanese language voice of Murphy Brown, which was a very, very fun, popular 80s sitcom about a news journalist.
Interesting. Yeah. I'm gonna have to look that up.
All right. I think we're gonna end it there. Thanks guys for coming on. This is a show I didn't think we were gonna get a lot of discussion out of, and we really did. And I'm glad I was able to get both of you on today to talk about it. As I actually had a really hard time finding people who wanted to talk about this show, but I'm glad this episode came together. I think there was a lot to explore.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm glad that we did.
Like I said, Jesse, it had never occurred to me to even seek this show out, much less watch the whole thing, and I enjoyed it. It's it's not a top 5 show for me, but it's probably a top 25, top 50. It's a quality production. It deserves to be remembered.
Yeah, I completely agree. And what a joy to be on this podcast with you, Jesse, and learning from you both, Mike and Jesse. And yeah, I hope we get to do this again. And I really look forward to seeing you hopefully next week at Anime North. I'm sure the episode will come out way after that, but
yeah,
timeline confusion.
We are recording this before Anime North 2026. It will definitely be out after the con. But Shirley, I'll see you there for sure. And yes, I would love to have you both on this show again in the future. For sure, no question. But thanks for coming on. Mike, can you let people know where they can find you on the internet and various social media places?
Yeah, you can find me under my real name. Actually, it's search for MikeToole.com on Blue Sky. That's where I do most of my posting on the internet. At conventions, my next stop is actually not going to be Anime North. Unfortunately, I'm going to be on vacation in Europe during that time. But I will
good
be.
Excuse.
Yeah, I will be at Kineticon in July, presenting some new panels there, and I'll be at Otakon to do the big discotheque industry panel at the end of July as well. So that's where you can find me next.
I'm mostly on Instagram. I sometimes dabble on Blue Sky. On Instagram, I'm Kyorkis, Skyorkis, or as Z once called me, Sky Orcus, which I kind of like a little bit more. And on Blue Sky, I'm Kyorkis.digital.
Great. And thanks for tuning in to Zon Canada. You can reach me on Blue Sky at jbetteridge or email zonandcanada@gmail.com. The theme song is by Ultra Klystron. That can be found on his album Packet Flood, and you can find that at ultraklystron.com. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Spotify, or your podcast app of choice. And I'll see you again.
فتضيء الظلام والليالي تنجلي بالصبر تجملي حاولي لن تفشلي بالصبر تجملي حاولي لن تفشلي قد تبدو الأيام كمياه ساكنة قمر لا ينام وغيوم تأتينا وتطل الأحلام بالألوان ذاتنا فتضيء الظلام والليالي تنجلي آملي آملي بالصبر تجملي آملي آملي حاولي لن تفشلي آملي آملي بالصبر تجملي